Is traveling with a tour company a good way to see some of the amazing sights that make Italy such a popular destination? Hi, everyone. This is your world, and welcome to it, where I talk about my visits to some interesting places. I'm Bill Bernstein. This video is about all the great things we saw as we visited some of the most well-known attractions in Italy. We decided to use a tour company rather than to manage our time and what we would visit ourselves. We had watched many people's good videos on what they would recommend, but decided that it made sense to go with a company with the experience of showing the splendor of Italy. So we chose Globus Tours, knowing that they had a lot of practice. We trusted that agency to show us the things that we would focus on if we were planning the trip. This trip happened a couple of months before the COVID pandemic, just after Thanksgiving in 2019. The fact that we went before the pandemic was a lucky break. And December is a time with very few tourists, so areas that are usually packed were not crowded at all, and the weather was good. Someone from the tour company met us at the airport and drove us to the hotel. After getting there, we didn't waste any time before going out to take in the atmosphere that is Venice by enjoying the views of the Grand Canal right outside our hotel. We felt that just walking around, crossing the bridges, and taking in the view immersed us in an atmosphere unlike any we had experienced, that special Venice feel. The next morning, we went to tour the Doge's palace. Doge was the title given to the elected official in the highest position in Venice, which was a republic. Let me just say it was a nice house in the grand tradition of what was once a wealthy, powerful city-state. This is not an outside view, this is just the inner courtyard. Although these steps were closed off, this had been a main entrance. The tour took us through some of the really spectacular rooms. Everything was remarkable, giving us a feel for what was the special grandeur of Venice in its heyday. As you see, even the ceilings weren't spared any of the splendor. During the late 13th century, Venice was the most prosperous city in Europe. After leaving the Doge's palace, we visited the branch of a major glass-blowing factory, Murano. Watching an artist create a piece from molten glass is pretty fascinating. Leaving the shop, we spent a couple of hours just exploring the area, crossing some of the canals, again, taking in the feel of Venice, and then walking around St. Mark's Square. This was just after a major flood, so there were still some wooden walkways that people were using to stay above the water. After that, we took advantage of the option to pay a bit extra to do something that is probably the first thing anyone thinks of when they think of Venice, go in a gondola, guided by a singing gondolier. Members of our tour group were in 2 or 3 gondolas, so we could listen to some different gondoliers. Later, more time at St. Mark's Square and on into the evening. The next day, we boarded the coach with our Globus tour guide and our group, headed for the next stop, Pisa. Just in case you forgot what it's like, here are some pictures of that tower, which is still leaning, as far as I can tell. I have to say, it was really nice to see in person something that I've seen in pictures my whole life. This was a stop on the way from Venice to Florence. So after we'd taken enough pictures of the tower, on to Florence. We arrived there late in the day, so our first outing was a quick stop before dinner, visiting this area with a wonderful view of the city at night and a copy of the famous statue of David. On a really pleasant walk to the restaurant where we had dinner, we crossed and got a great view of the Arno River. The restaurant was near an outdoor market and a famous, really large church, the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. The next morning, we visited the Galleria dell'Accademia, where we saw one of the most famous sculptors in the world, Michelangelo's David. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this figure is priceless. After the gallery, we spent some more time near the church with its statue of Dante outside and had lunch at the outdoor market. We didn't eat at this Eataly in Florence while we were there, but since the one back home in our city opened, we've eaten there a few times. We could certainly see that spending more time in Florence and the rest of Tuscany would be something to consider for a future visit. Then on to Assisi, where we arrived in the evening, staying at a nice inn that brought home the atmosphere of the monastery. The next morning, a monk led the tour of the Basilica of St. Francis, where tourists are not allowed to take pictures. After we left Assisi, on the way to Rome, we stopped for lunch at a combination souvenir shop restaurant. We chose the buffet for some pasta that was prepared as we watched. Of all the Italian meals I've had in my life, and I've had a lot, I'll remember this lunch at a small rest stop as one of the best. The pasta and sauce were in a class of their own. That evening, we arrived in the Eternal City, Rome. That night, we paid a bit extra for another one of the optional excursions to dinner, this time with a bit of opera added. With some humor thrown in when they got a couple of the tour members to be part of the act. The next morning started with Vatican City. On the walk through the Vatican Museum, the bust of Julius Caesar may be his most accurate likeness. The rest of the way on this long walk, passing through remarkable creations on the way to the Sistine Chapel, was itself a fantastic viewing experience. There's no photography allowed in the Sistine Chapel. Because we were there in December, a much less crowded time, we had no trouble finding a spot to sit and take in the view of the ceiling. Then, on through the remarkable Basilica to St. Peter's Square. Next was a visit to the Colisseum. It's interesting to think about today how soon we tear down old buildings and compare that to the 2,000-year-old Colosseum. Like many things in the ancient world, it was built by slaves, about 100,000, over about 10 years under 3 emperors. It is the world's largest amphitheater. After that, we indulged in another extra event, a walking tour that included a stop at Trevi Fountain. We had lunch at a small shop next to the fountain that had some great gelato for dessert. The following day was not part of the tour, but just an extra day for us in Rome. Fortunately for us, it ended up being a highlight of our trip. Kim is from a town in the far south of Thailand, and just walking around near Hadrian's tomb, a site we really enjoyed viewing, we happened to encounter a couple from her hometown. Kim actually knew this lady's mother. It was just a nice visit. As evening fell, we watched the sun set over the Tiber, a perfect end to what was really a delightful experience for both of us. We felt that Globus really took care of us. Everything was made easy, and it enabled us to focus on enjoying the sights and not having to worry about our time, about where we were going next or what to do. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit subscribe below. You can click on this link to see my video about Iceland and the cruise we took to see all of the most amazing sights in that wonderful island. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Until then, so long from all of us in your world.